welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. It's time for another round of Narcissist Trash Talk. In this particular video, I'll be covering what I would call a reality check. If you're dealing with such a creature, or you think you might be dealing with such a creature, well, I've got some valuable information for you. I'm going to cover the typical argument style that these creatures love to use, of which attempts to override reality, and I'm going to expose that right here, and then at the end, there'll be the key. If you're looking for answers because you're worried that you might be dealing with one of these cluster B monster creatures, you've come to the right place. Chances are, if you're here and you're dealing with someone you're worried about being a creature, you're probably involved a little bit more than you'd like to be. So it's not like you've dated once or twice and you can just turn away. You probably have gotten a little bit close with this creature that seems so flawless at the beginning. If you're dealing with this type of toxic creature, there will be something that comes up that should be a deal breaker. For example, you're a lady and you're dating a guy and he's telling you that you're an item and he's not interested in any other girls. He makes it clear all the time. And maybe you're insecure because maybe your last partner cheated with the barmaid down the street or something. So if you let that be known, the potential creature will know that you're concerned about such things. And it claims to love you, remember, in the beginning. If you end up finding out that, let's say it did run off with the cashier at the grocery store down the street, and you not only heard, but you saw some piece of evidence, because we've already covered long ago, these creatures, they just don't admit to anything. So if they did do something wrong and you ask, did you do something wrong? The answer, of course, first will be no. Well, then if you uncover, well, that's funny because I found this surveillance footage that shows you doing this, then it will switch to,
oh, well, I did that one time, yes, just once. But only once. I didn't tell you because you'd get upset. See, look at you now. No wonder I didn't tell you.
If you're anything like I am, and you're involved in such a thing where, let's say it does end up with the cashier, after all that talk of how it would never consider doing that, and you also realize too that if you hadn't come across whatever you did come across that tipped you off to what was happening, you were intended to never know this happened. And it makes all the difference in the world too, because maybe you're skeptical of your new partner or potential partner, and you've made that clear, and then it does this kind of stuff. That's not trying to inspire confidence. Typically what you'll find when this thing happens and you're still around, you will hear the creature try to justify its actions. It can do this in several ways. I'll cover a few of them. One of them will be to kind of detach itself. Like it'll tell you that it did whatever it did. And of course, with their rules, the first answer is they didn't do it. When you find out they did, okay, well they did, but they only did it once. Well, typically what will happen when you push further, because for you, after what you've heard, all the brainwashing you've been given about how devoted and loyal it is to you and has been from the beginning, but now this pops up, it's going to be natural for you to think, wait a second, you made it such a point to say you were loyal. How is this loyal? They will be quick to oftentimes use the ridiculous excuse, which involves them detaching themselves from what they've done, pretty much when you listen to it, and they'll say something to you like,
I didn't want to do that with her, but...
And then the other part is they'll blame you.
Because you were so suspicious of me and thought that I was doing something, well, I went ahead and did it because of that. But I didn't want to.
And when it gives any kind of details of whatever did happen, it usually is something like,
oh, it was no fun anyway. It wasn't that great.
Typically this will happen if it still needs your supply for some reason. It will trivialize whatever it did with the cashier down the street, and it's not going to sit well with you. You're going to hear it, and you're going to compare it to all that loyalty talk. You're going to be confused. You'll be probably looking for answers like, wait a second, how could this have even happened? They're going to give you their phony explanation, which is basically a fake excuse, such as what I just said, and they'll try to twist it so that whatever indiscretion they did, it's tied to you. It's your fault because you questioned it, because you were suspicious of it for good reason. It's going to blame you for it. So the message it's trying to send to you is,
well, if you hadn't have been so nosy and checked up on me,
One they love to use is to say,
because you're so insecure and thought that I was doing something wrong, that's why I did it. I didn't want to.
did you hear that, con artistry? Because you were suspicious, which, by the way, you were only suspicious because you saw suspicious things, and your intuition was telling you suspicious things were happening, and then you get this kind of answer? Well, if you weren't so suspicious, I wouldn't have ever done it. Lies. That's what we're going to expose. Many times when you're involved with the person in a way where their hooks are sunk into your life, it's not always that easy to just pick up and leave. Now it may be, but a lot of times it isn't. Maybe you just bought a house together. Maybe you just both signed a lease. Well, you can't just run away that easily. Which probably means that you'll want to believe the ridiculous excuses the person's giving, and you'll want to convince yourself that, well, maybe that's true, maybe it is right, maybe I am too insecure. And of course this is gaslighting, because you're not insecure. Well, if you are, you have good reason to be. You're simply reacting to stimuli around you that you see and pick up on. If something feels fishy, the normal thing to do is to ask, hey, this didn't feel right, what's going on here? You don't want to hear, oh, you're just too insecure. No, you want to know the truth. Well, with these creatures, you're not going to get it. Time will pass and you'll be thinking about it. Maybe you silenced your inner thoughts previously by accepting its retarded excuse, but you're thinking about it more usually, and it still doesn't sit right with you. Especially because you're telling yourself, oh my goodness, I've given up all my freedom for this person. We're together, we're supposed to be an item, and this is happening? This shouldn't be happening. And then you may bring it up again. A thing they love to do is, assuming they've given you the retarded, ridiculous excuse such as the insecurity, you're going to still be hurting from it. And you may say, wait a second, how could you have done that with that cashier after all? And you'll bring it up again, and you'll be likely to hear something like,
oh, I've already told you why I did that. It was because of
that same stupid excuse which isn't valid, and they'll just rely on that. They will not go into any further depth. No understanding, no empathy, of course, because they don't have any. They won't say,
I've been thinking about that. That must have been really hard for you. Well, I've done this, so I can never do that again, and here's all the steps I'm taking.
You won't hear any of that. You'll hear,
would you quit bringing that up? I already told you the answer on that one.
That's a big red flag right there if you're hearing that, especially when you compare it to the love bombing and how it was there for your any and every need, and now you have a need that's personal with it, and you're getting this response. Red flag. It's probably a creature. But we're going to examine the often used excuse, or part of the excuse for whatever it did, and justification. It will try to convince you, so you still think there's hope for you two to be together, because you might want this person even though it's done this, because you're deluded. You're still under its spell, so you don't realize yet. But we're going to examine when they claim, for example, it went off with the cashier and did whatever it did at the no-tell motel. You're going to hear things like,
I didn't want to do it. I only did it because of you doing this.
Which again is BS. People do not do things such as sneak off with the cashier for a rendezvous if they do not want to. It's not a requirement. It's not a tax that you're going to have to pay or have your property taken away. No, it's a choice. You have to pull in rationalization here and logic. Tell yourself, okay, I'm with this person who's making it clear, devoted, telling me that I'm the one, but then this happened. Now, when I try to get closure or comfort or reassurance it will never happen again, I end up being blamed for being insecure, which now I am insecure. It just goes on and on. When they tell you that line,
I didn't want to do it,
I've got a parallel example to illustrate exactly what's going on here. You are a person who has a friend. Your friend said,
hey, this Friday, 311's coming. I'm going to get us 2 tickets. I think we should go.
You happen to have to work on Friday, really late. You would not be able to go. And let's say that you're not interested in 311. You don't like their music. And so you kind of feel relieved, like, oh, I'm glad I have to work Friday, so sorry, find someone else to go with you. And that's an example of you not wanting to do something, and you don't do it. You've got to work. Well, let's compare that example to another one. Let's say you have to work Friday, and one of your favorite groups no doubt with Gwen Stefani is coming to your hometown, and you just found out about it, but you have to work Friday. So what do? You start researching. You dig into the schedule. You look at who's working on each day, and you know that they don't always need everybody there at once. So you see that Tamika is off on Friday. You also notice that Dan is off on Friday. So you send them both an email saying, hey, I really want to see this show. It's coming up Friday. I have to work though, and you're off. Would you mind switching schedules with me, and I'll work your day, and you can let me have Friday off? And let's say you go through all those steps, and then you end up going to the show and loving it. Well, there's a difference there. In the first example, you didn't really want to go, and you were asked to go, and you had to work anyway, so you just said, well, I have to work, sorry. That was the end of it. But in the second example, it's something you really wanted to do, and what did you do? You took the steps. Well, when we switch back to our creature, you have to look at the details there, that it's not the exact same as the work situation, but it's very similar in the fact that this person has told you it's devoted to you all these times. In order for it to have pulled off the stunt that it pulled off, you have to realize that required strategic planning. Kind of like you contacting your coworkers trying to get someone to fill in for you. It also involves deceiving you. After all it's said about how devoted it is, which to a person with a conscience and morals of some kind, that would not be an easy task. Yet, it's very simple for this creature, and it had to lie to you to make excuses up. It had to put a lot of energy into this. You have to step back and look at that. Ask yourself, is that the behavior of someone who didn't want to do that? And the answer is no. People don't go to all that trouble to do something they don't want to do. Period. Don't buy the BS. It's going to try to convince you.
Oh, I didn't even want to be with her, but...
No, wrong. Wrong! That is a lie, and I hate it when I hear it. They're trying to override reality. What I just told you was the reality. The person wouldn't go through all the steps required in order to make that happen. And you also know that had you not found out, it would probably be happening again. They don't stop because they realize they've made a mistake and, oh, they've changed their ways. No, it's because you found out. Then they'll just be more careful to conceal it. Because these are sick creatures. They are children who never matured emotionally. They're just a baby inside an adult's body. Once you've proceeded through the typical steps, first is the idealization, and then the devalue. Usually the devalue occurs, in a lot of cases, from my experience I've learned, they love to blame you as well if you were to, for example, remember some of those first dates where it did all kinds of stuff for you and you barely even knew its name, and now it's being the way it is. You may sometimes just break down and say, look, what happened to that great person that I used to know that was so sweet and nice and did all these things for me? A typical response you'll get from one of these faker creatures is,
you ruined it. Because of you, that person went away.
They want to try to blame you for their complete personality change, which is another lie. That is not valid. You did not change who they are, especially with the fact that you simply uncovered its bad deeds and exposed them. That doesn't mean that you're being mean. It means you're caring about yourself and making sure you're in the right place and seeing evidence to indicate you're not. And this creature is not behaving in any way that indicates it's an adult or accountable. It's just going to accuse you and make it all about you.
I was nice until you started being suspicious.
And of course the response really would be, well, I only became suspicious because you were acting in ways that you shouldn't have been. And turned out you were doing bad things. But they don't see that. Nothing's their fault, it's your fault. You shouldn't have looked into it. So don't buy that one either. They changed because you uncovered them. Typically, they're searching for another target at that time, but you'll never hear about it. You will be treated just like everything's normal, and even if you think to yourself, wow, I just exposed some horrible lies and this creature's acting like everything's okay, you'd expect it to be running away, but it's not. Well, it's probably planning secretly, but it doesn't want to be alone. So it doesn't want to just say goodbye, it's over, and hope the new one works out. No, it will make sure the new one works out first. So it'll string you along, give you little hints, based on what you've said before that you wanted, to make it seem like there might be a chance it can change for you, which of course it won't. But these are the tactics these creatures use. Well, now we're ready for the key. First off, these things that were covered, they're all abusive behaviors, but they fall under the term covert abuse. So it's not like a husband at home beating his wife with a pan every night in the head and calling her names. That would be overt abuse. This stuff is sneaky, silent, and slow, and poisoning over time. And that's the nature of these creatures, to smile in your face while they're stabbing you in the back. The problem with these types is, well, you may pick up on the traits that indicate they're one of them, but you can never bring it up with them and expect any resolution. It can be very slow and painful dealing with these creatures and then eventually realizing that's what you've ended up with. Because nobody, when they're a kid, says, when I grow up, I'm going to find somebody who lies and pretends to be a nice person who really isn't, who's sneaking around with my sister and mother. That's what nobody would ever want that. And these creatures must know it because that's what they're doing to other people. All of these things are happening because of one thing, which I call the key. It's that you're still around. I've explained before how that can happen, where you can clearly see a behavior is horrifying, yet it's usually, as I said before, when they've got hooks into your life. Like you've moved in together, you've had so many fun times that now you're going to realize were built-in fakery. Anything you were interested in, it was like, oh, I like that too, and you thought, wow, that's great, someone really likes everything. But none of it was real, you'll find out eventually, and you were tricked. You were tricked to get into a lifestyle with this creature. Pieces were built of fake things where it went out of its way to help you for insurance, so then later down the road when you, for example, pull the conversation up about the waitress lady, that's unacceptable, it shouldn't have done it, period. The problem is, it's got you trapped usually, because most people, if they saw that, they would just leave. But these people are crafty, they're predators, they set the stage up just right, so they'll get you in a place where you're kind of trapped, and then unleash the evil. And they have a system as well. If you give any criticism to what they're doing, and even say, you know what, that you're doing, that's abusive, it's terrible, they will just say, oh, you're abusive by saying that. Or they'll maximize and minimize things. So if they did do something that anybody would agree was horrible, they'll try to minimize that. Oh, it's not that big a deal. But then if they did something for you during the love bombing, they will throw that in your face and maximize it. What about the time I did this for you? And you're going to worry about this little thing? And there's a constant battle with that kind of discussion as well. So the key is, because you're still there, so the key is to not still be there, to get out of there, which needs to be treated just like any domestic abuse situation if you're living it with the person, because it is abuse, it's just not the smash you in the face kind. In fact, it can be much worse when it's psychological, and it's like their mind control that they put you under. And if they isolate you, as they try to do, take you to a new city where nobody knows you, things like that are common. That way you don't have any source of support. Everything comes from them, and they will basically brainwash you into thinking that the way you're living is right. And of course, it'll give some sweet things here and there to say, look, see, I'm so wonderful. And then the rest of the abuse continues. But the wool's been pulled over your eyes, and it's very difficult to understand that. And a lot of us would rather think that we're mistaken and fall into this relationship thinking that we're wrong, and then we find out, of course, if it's a toxic creature, there's no hope. And we were right all along, and the longer we kept it going, the worse it ends up getting. So if you're still with the creature, the key is to get away from it. If it meets these types of criteria, all that will happen, you'll go through the stages, and then you'll end up heartbroken. They don't have the sense or the courtesy to simply say, hey, I don't think this relationship's right, I'm leaving it now. Nope, they want to keep it going until they get the new one going. And then once it's solid,
Oh, I'm through with you.
and then you'll be devastated, usually. Hopefully not, though. If any of these things apply to your creature, if they do, escape. Don't look for an explanation because you'll get retarded BS. Look at what it is, feel what's really going on, use your intuition and common sense. Don't listen to what it says because it'll try to throw you off track. They always do. And just escape.
I am the Narcissist. You wish you were me.
Honey, since I'm giving confessions, I might as well tell you. I could tell that you were very underwhelmed when I dumped you and ran off with the guy down the street. I know it broke your little heart so much. Well, honey, I know one of the things that went through your mind was how could I do such a thing after I told you I loved you every single day in a text message. Well, honey, I pull that trick on every guy. You were just one of many. You can get a feel for how I really am as a person, because to me, you were simply interchangeable with all the others. You were nothing special. I said all the same sweet nothings to all them that I said to you, so don't feel special. Just be glad that I'm not at your front door, because I'm gonna be soon. And you better give me what I want, because I see you as like a really good hammer. But I later developed an interest in a drill. I put the hammer up on the shelf. I'm playing with the drill now, and it's drilling me some good holes. But you never know. I might need a hammer again in the near future. Keep that in mind. Look out for my call. You better. You got to Cause that's your best bet. Watch me now, but look at the wild as a tick. You got to have it. That's what's an honest session when you got to call it quit. Tick. You just can't quit. The fact that you leave me no makes that pulling. There was more than last night on my mind. So I need to get off my chest. And no matter what may come to shine, the dream will always keep me coming. That is the gal with the kill them stunning. Oh, keep me coming. That is the gal with the kill them stunning. Hey, keep me coming. That is the gal with the kill them stunning. Oh, keep me coming. That is the gal with the kill them stunning. Hey, you make me nervous, throat dry, my brain is empty. Don't know why, but I thought you doing something which is really doing nothing, and you could push me out all day. Many moves, many moves. Why to try when I knew it was no end? Why to try when the start was so bright? Say that the legislation just let escape, cause the way she's being fine. Oh.